My name is Camille Dorsey. I'm 33 years old, and this is the story of how my parents tried to erase my son from their lives, and how I erased them from mine instead. I never imagined I'd become a widow at such a young age. Just 8 months ago, I had a husband who kissed my forehead every morning before work, and a son who laughed like the sun was caught in his throat. But in a moment, one malfunction at a construction site, everything changed. Daniel, my husband, was gone. Just like that. Grief is a strange thing. Doesn't come all at once. It arrives in pieces. Some days it's an empty chair at the breakfast table. Other days it's the way your son says, "Dad," and then stares into space. Lucas, my son, was only 7 when Daniel died. Too young to grasp the cruel weight of loss, but old enough to feel its absence. Most mornings I found myself sitting at the kitchen table, quietly crying into my coffee while Lucas colored pictures beside me, unaware that I was silently unraveling. And yet, there was a light in the darkness. Daniel's parents, my in-laws Marianne and Harold, became our lifeline. Every day after school they picked Lucas up. They fed him, played with him, listened to his endless questions about space and bugs and volcanoes. Marianne would greet me at the door with a hug so tight I could swear she was trying to hold my shattered heart together with her arms. And Harold, quiet, thoughtful Harold, would slip a folded bill into my coat pocket and say, "For emergencies," even though he knew I still had the life insurance money untouched in my account. "Family lifts each other up," Marianne told me once when I tried to refuse the help. "We don't keep score." They were right. After Daniel's death, the insurance company paid out $250,000. I didn't need anyone's money, not really. But what I did need, what Lucas needed, was unconditional love. And Marianne and Harold gave it to us without hesitation. My own parents, on the other hand, they gave us silence, coldness, judgment. Growing up, I was never the favorite. That was my older sister, Deirdre, the golden child. She married a doctor, had 3 children, lived in a 6-bedroom house, and spoke with a kind of self-importance that made you feel like dirt just by standing near her. My parents adored her, worshipped her. She could do no wrong. Me, I was the leftover, the afterthought. And when Daniel died, my parents didn't rush in to help. They didn't offer to watch Lucas or bring meals or even check in beyond a few half-hearted texts. But what hurt most wasn't their absence. It was their presence when it came time for comparisons. One Saturday afternoon, a month after Daniel's funeral, I brought Lucas over for dinner. It was supposed to be casual, a chance to reconnect. Lucas, ever the curious boy, spotted an old radio on the shelf and asked, "Grandpa, how does that play music without a screen?" My mother barely looked up from the table. "Can't you teach that boy to be quiet?" she snapped. Deirdre's kids never ask such silly things. My father grunted, opened his laptop, and shoved it in front of Lucas. "Here, play a game. No more questions." Lucas stared at the screen, confusion in his eyes. He didn't want to play a game. He wanted to know. To learn. Connect. I clenched my jaw so tightly it ached. But I said nothing. I'd been taught since childhood that silence was the safest shield. It didn't stop there. That night at dinner, Deirdre's kids were praised for their excellent table manners, while Lucas was scolded for asking why we ate soup first. Completely innocent question. My mother dropped her spoon like he'd just insulted the Pope. "Camille, please control your child," she hissed. "We're trying to have a peaceful dinner." My heart broke then, not just for me but for my son. Lucas's shoulders slumped, and he stared into his bowl, silent for the rest of the meal. I could see it in his posture, the shrinking, the quiet erosion of joy. And yet Deirdre's children, who were practically climbing over each other, chewing with mouths open, and giggling at TikTok videos, were lavished with praise. "See how well Deirdre raised her kids," my mother cooed. "They know how to behave." I wanted to scream. If behaving meant ignoring everyone and zoning out on screens, then I was proud that my son didn't fit the mold. Still I bit my tongue. I'd long learned that speaking up only made things worse. But inside me, a pressure was building, like a dam ready to burst. After dinner, I pulled Lucas aside and asked if he was okay. He nodded slowly, then whispered, "Did I do something bad, Mom?" I hugged him hard. "No, baby. You did everything right. I'm proud of you." And I meant it. The final straw came a few weeks later. My mother called and invited me to dinner. "Just adults this time," she chirped. "We want to talk about something important." I hesitated but agreed. That Sunday, I left Lucas with Marianne and Harold and showed up at my parents' house with a bottle of wine and a wary heart. From the start, something felt off. My mom had cooked my favorite meal. My dad asked about my job. Deirdre even offered to help set the table. It was like being in a play where everyone was miscast. Then came the ask. "Camille," my mother began. Her voice sweetened like syrup. "Your father and I have been going through some hard times. Medical bills, heating costs. You know how it is." Tensed. "We were wondering." My dad jumped in. "Since the insurance came through, maybe you could help. Nothing big. Just $1,000 a month." I nearly choked on my water. "I what?" Deirdre smiled across the table. "I give them 500, she lied smoothly. "It's not much, but every little bit helps." Felt like the walls closed in. They weren't asking for help. They were demanding payment. As if my loss had become their opportunity. I said I'd think about it. And I did. For days. But after the fourth guilt trip phone call and my mother crying about heating oil, I set up the transfer. $1,000 gone every month. I told myself it was worth it. If it meant they'd show Lucas more kindness. If it meant peace. But peace never came. Because love that has a price tag is never real. And respect that must be bought is nothing but a leash. And soon, the leash would tighten. But what they didn't know is, I had already begun sharpening the blade that would cut it for good. The first month after I started sending the money, I convinced myself things might get better. I tried to believe, desperately, that maybe I was finally being seen. Not just as Deirdre's shadow, not just as the struggling widow, but as Camille. Daughter. A mother. A woman trying to hold it all together. But what I got in return was silence. No phone calls to check on Lucas. No invitations to visit. No mention of the $1,000 leaving my account like clockwork. Just a void. Quiet, bottomless and cold. I told myself it was fine. Maybe they were just adjusting. Maybe they were busy. I clung to those excuses like a raft in a storm, because the alternative was too painful to admit. I was being used. Again. Then came the Wednesday afternoon that shattered any lingering doubt. I had an unexpected meeting at work. My manager had bumped up a client presentation by 2 hours, and I couldn't pick Lucas up from school in time. Marianne had a fever, and Harold was out with the mechanic getting their brakes fixed. It was the first time in months that I had no one else to turn to. So I called my mother. "Mom," I said carefully, "I have a meeting this afternoon. Came up last minute. Could you pick up Lucas from school? Just this once." There was a long pause. I could hear the sound of something being chopped in the background. "Carrots, maybe." "Oh, Camille," she sighed, dragging out the words like a martyr in a soap opera. "I would, but my back's been awful lately. I can barely sit in the car, let alone drive." "But it's just a 10-minute drive. Why don't you call Deirdre? She's much healthier than I am." I hung up before I said something I'd regret. Then I called Deirdre. Her laugh was dry and short. "Are you serious? I've got Jason's basketball, Lily's piano, and Emma's dentist appointment. I'm not a babysitter." Blick. Just like that. The same people who claimed to be family, who were gladly pocketing my $1,000 every month, couldn't be bothered to help the one time I actually needed it. So I called Harold. 5 minutes later, he was standing outside Lucas's school in his fleece-lined jacket, hands stuffed in his pockets, a warm smile stretching beneath his white mustache. I watched him walk Lucas out to the car with his arm wrapped gently around his shoulder, nodding along as Lucas chattered about the erupting volcano model he'd made in science class. That night, Harold dropped Lucas off with a grin and said, "You've got a good one there. Bright curious. Don't let anyone dim that light." I cried in the hallway after he left. Not just because of the kindness, but because it was so rare, so unforced, and so far from the cold obligations I had grown up with. But the pattern didn't stop there. A few weeks later, Lucas's birthday rolled around. He didn't want anything big, just a small party at home with balloons, cake, and close family. I called my mother, trying to bridge the gap one more time. "Would you be able to come early?" asked gently. "Maybe help me set up a few things before everyone arrives." There was a long pause. Then, "Oh, I've got a tea time with the girls at the country club. You know how hard it is to get a Saturday morning slot." "Sorry, sweetheart." That was it. No offer to reschedule. No suggestion of stopping by later. Just another brush-off disguised as casual neglect. But Marianne and Harold. They arrived at 9 a.m. sharp. Marianne brought balloons, streamers, and a homemade chocolate cake shaped like a rocket ship, Lucas's favorite. Harold carried in a giant box wrapped in navy blue paper that contained a telescope with Lucas's name engraved on the side. They spent the entire day helping me decorate, cook, entertain. At one point, I caught Harold crawling under the table pretending to be a moon monster while Lucas and 3 cousins squealed in laughter. That night, as I tucked Lucas into bed, he whispered, "I love Grandma Marianne and Grandpa Harold so much, Mom." "I do too, baby," I replied, brushing his hair back. And yet, even after all that, the $1,000 still left my account on the first of the month. It left every month. A silent tribute to a family that never truly saw me. A payment for a love that was never real. And every time I checked my bank balance, a small part of me died. Then came Lucas's school play. He'd been practicing for weeks. Every night after dinner, he stood on our rug in the living room and recited his lines as the lead in The Little Star Who Could. He was so proud. He even picked out his own outfit. Navy trousers, suspenders, and a sparkly yellow bow tie he insisted made him look celestial. When I asked my mother if she could come, she didn't even hesitate. "I'm swamped, Camille. We have a dinner party that night. Why don't you ask Deirdre?" "Already did. She's busy too." "Well, I'm sure Lucas will do just fine without a full audience." She hung up. I didn't even argue. I was too tired. The night of the play, I sat in the 3rd row with Marianne and Harold waving wildly at the stage as Lucas walked out under the spotlight. His eyes scanned the audience, and when he saw us, his entire face lit up. He performed his little heart out. And when the curtains closed, I clapped until my hands hurt. Later, as he hugged Harold and Marianne tight, Lucas asked quietly, "Do you think real stars shine even if no one's watching?" I knelt down and whispered, "Yes, baby. But tonight, everyone who matters saw your light." That was when the seed of decision took root. A quiet whisper inside me turned into a steady voice. "This can't go on." But I didn't act. Not yet. I kept the money transfers going. Kept answering my mother's texts. Kept pretending everything was fine. Until one phone call lit the match. It was a week before Christmas. I was hanging ornaments on the tree with Lucas when the phone rang. My mother's voice was bright. Too bright. "Camille, we're doing our traditional Christmas Eve dinner. Just a small note, dear. It'll be adults only this year. We want something quieter, more elegant." Froze. Adults only. Yes, you know. Wine, conversation, no toys everywhere. "I'm sure Lucas will be fine with Harold and Marianne for one night." I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I just said okay and hung up. Then I stood there in silence, the ornament still clutched in my hand, the twinkle lights glowing behind me like mocking stars. I couldn't tell Lucas. How could I explain that on the most magical night of the year, the night of family and wonder and warmth, his own grandparents didn't want him? I stared at the glittering tree, heart aching with the realization. I had been paying these people to exclude my child. But I didn't cry. Not this time. I felt something else rising inside me. Something cold. Something resolute. Because now, it wasn't about me anymore. It was about him. And I was done pretending. Christmas Eve arrived, quiet and heavy. The snow had started early that morning, layering the streets in soft white, as if trying to cover up the ugliness that had built inside my chest. Lucas was humming to himself in the living room, carefully pressing little green felt trees onto the windows with his glue stick, still blissfully unaware of the lie his own bloodline had wrapped in red ribbon and silence. I'd spent the past few days thinking, spiraling really, wondering if I should just skip the dinner altogether. But some part of me still wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, it was a misunderstanding. Or that showing up would prove something about my loyalty, about my place in this family, about Lucas. So I made a choice. I dropped Lucas off at Marianne and Harold's house, where the fire was already glowing and the smell of gingerbread cookies drifted through the air like something out of a holiday movie. Lucas hugged me tight, whispering, "Don't be long, okay, Mommy?" I kissed his forehead. "I won't be." I drove to my parents' house alone. The driveway was packed, far more cars than any previous year. I could already hear the sound of laughter and holiday music pouring through the windows. It was strange, I thought, oddly loud for an adults-only party. When I stepped inside, I nearly dropped the gift bag in my hand. Children. Freeware. Jason was chasing Lily around the tree. Emma was under the dining table stacking blocks with Deirdre's youngest. Even the distant cousins were there, their kids smashing toy trains into the wall like it was part of the entertainment. I stood in the entryway, stunned. One phrase replayed in my mind like a scream underwater. No kids allowed. So why were there children? Deirdre appeared first, all radiant smiles and hostess warmth. "Camille, you made it. Come in, come in. We're just about to start dinner." I walked in like I was in a daze. Everything around me blurred, the lights, the sounds, the too sweet holiday music, and yet I felt ice forming behind my ribs. An older aunt wandered over. "Where's Lucas? Is he sick?" she asked with a puzzled frown. Before I could answer, my uncle chimed in from the side. I was hoping to see that boy tonight. He's such a bright spark." I barely managed a nod. The whispers started immediately. I slipped through the crowd like a shadow, looking for my mother. I found her in the kitchen, standing near the wine bottles, laughing as she poured glasses for a group of guests. Her joy wilted the second she saw my face. I didn't need a mirror to know how I looked. Calm, cold, and shaking beneath the surface. "We need to talk," I said quietly. She hesitated, then led me into the hallway just off the kitchen, past the hanging family portraits and the shelves filled with Deirdre's kids' school photos. "You said this was adults only," I said flatly. "So why are all the kids here? Except for mine." She flinched, just slightly, but I saw it. "Camille," she said, her voice switching into that syrupy tone she used when cornered. "Lucas is a very excitable child. These gatherings can be overwhelming. We just wanted a peaceful evening. You understand. Peaceful." I barked out a bitter laugh. "Jason knocked over a lamp 5 minutes ago, and Lily screamed through half the carolers. But Lucas, he's the problem." She pressed her lips into a thin line. "Please don't ruin Christmas." I stared at her, not with anger, but with the quiet, clear resolve of someone who had finally stopped caring what this woman thought of her. Without another word, I walked back into the living room. The crowd had gathered around the tree. Everyone was passing around drinks and taking photos. So I raised my voice, not yelling but loud enough to stop the music, stop the small talk, stop the lies. "Everyone," I said calmly, "can I have your attention?" The room quieted. Heads turned. "You're probably wondering why I came alone tonight. Why Lucas isn't here. Some of you asked if he was sick." My mother froze behind me, wine glass midair. "Well," I continued, "my mother told me this was an adults-only party. No kids allowed." Gasps scattered through the room like shattered ornaments. I gestured to the chaos of toys and tablet-surfing children. Clearly, that rule only applied to one child. Mine. My voice was steady now. Strong. Lucas wasn't welcome. Not because he's unruly. Not because he's loud. But because in this family, kindness and curiosity are seen as flaws. And I've spent my entire life trying to earn approval I was never going to get. Deirdre's husband, Carl, was the first to react. "Wait, what?" he muttered, looking between my mom and Deirdre. "That can't be right." I wasn't done. "For months," I said, "I've been sending my parents $1,000 a month, every month, hoping it would earn their support, their love, their attention, hoping it would help them treat Lucas better." Stunned silence. "And I was told," I continued, turning toward Deirdre, "that Deirdre was sending 500 too. But that was a lie, wasn't it?" Deirdre's face turned ghost white. "Camille," she started. "You never sent a penny," I said, voice sharp. "You let me believe I was just doing my part. You let me pay their bills. And in return, my son was the only one not invited here tonight." My mother was red-faced. My father's jaw clenched. My uncle stood. "You made Camille pay your bills while Deirdre lied and did nothing." His voice was angry now, disgusted. "You excluded her child on Christmas." My mother stammered, trying to reclaim control. "We just thought, Lucas can be difficult and Deirdre's had such a hard year." "Enough," I said, cold and final. "I've spent my life being treated like the spare daughter, the afterthought, and I was willing to swallow that. But when you made my son feel like he wasn't good enough, when you told him he wasn't welcome on Christmas, that's where I draw the line." I set down the gift bag I had brought, still neatly wrapped, now meaningless, and I walked out. I didn't open a single present. I didn't say goodbye. Outside, the snow had thickened, blanketing the world in silence. It wasn't until I reached the car that my hands began to shake. But not from fear. From freedom. And as I sat there in the driver's seat, watching the warm house disappear behind me, I pulled out my phone, opened my banking app, and canceled the monthly transfer. A notification popped up. "Transaction cancelled." 3 words. But they felt like a revolution. I woke up Christmas morning to a strange silence. One that didn't ache. There was no guilt, no burning weight in my chest. No pit in my stomach dreading a phone call or a sideways comment about what I was doing wrong. It was just me, Lucas, and a quiet house that finally felt like home. The sunlight streamed through the frosted window panes, casting golden rays over the living room floor where Lucas sat surrounded by wrapping paper and warmth. He was hugging the teddy bear Marianne had knit for him, the one with a little red scarf and button eyes. His face glowed with pure, unfiltered joy. "Mom," he said, breathless, "this is the best Christmas ever." I didn't say anything. I just smiled, knelt beside him, and held him tightly. Longer than usual, tighter than ever. That morning, we didn't have a dozen guests or a big dinner table or people pretending to love us. We had peace. We had each other. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed. First, it was a message from my Aunt Lisa. "Camille, I just wanted to say I saw what happened last night. You were brave. You were right. And we support you. Don't let them make you feel otherwise." Then another one. "It was disgusting what your mom and Deirdre did. If you ever need anything, I'm here." The messages kept coming. Texts from cousins, uncles, even family friends who had witnessed the whole thing or heard about it secondhand. One by one they came forward not just to express support, but to say they saw what I had tried so hard to hide all my life. The favoritism, the manipulation, the exploitation. And then, that evening, while Lucas and I were baking cookies in our pajamas, the phone rang again. It was Lisa, my cousin's wife. Her voice was low, but her tone held a kind of breathless electricity. "You won't believe what happened after you left." I leaned against the counter, still holding the mixing spoon. "What?" "After you walked out, the whole room exploded. Everyone started asking questions. Why Lucas wasn't invited, why they'd lied about Deirdre contributing, why your mom was taking your money every month while treating you like dirt." I didn't say anything. Just listened. Your Uncle Jack stormed out. Aunt May refused to eat. And then, this is the wild part. Andrew, Deirdre's husband. He lost it. I've never seen him like that. My heart stopped for a beat. What did he do? Lisa exhaled. He packed up Jason, Lily, and Emma on the spot. Told Deirdre he was taking them to his parents' house for the rest of Christmas. Said she needed time to think about what she'd become. I nearly dropped the spoon. Andrew was calm, rational, polite to a fault. The kind of man who avoided conflict even if it meant swallowing his pride. For him to walk out, especially on Christmas, that said everything. Did he really say that? Asked stunned. Word for word, Lisa replied. He told her, "You've turned into someone I don't recognize. And you hurt your sister to keep a lie alive. That's not the woman I married." I closed my eyes and leaned my head against the cabinet. Justice, not revenge, not cruelty, but a reckoning that had arrived not by my hand, but by the weight of the truth itself. That night I turned off my phone. I didn't need to read the stream of frantic messages that followed. I didn't need to see the "we just wanted what's best for the family" texts or the "don't let this small thing tear us apart, please." Because it wasn't a small thing. It never had been. They hadn't just excluded my son from Christmas dinner. They'd excluded him from love, from belonging, from dignity. And they'd only shown remorse when their performance fell apart and the audience started booing. Lucas never asked where we went that night. He never asked why he didn't see his grandparents. Instead, he snuggled beside me on the couch, holding his bear, and whispered, "Can we do this again next year? Just us." I kissed the top of his head and whispered, "Absolutely." Over the next few weeks, the silence from my parents and Deirdre became deafening, but it wasn't peace. It was strategy. I could sense it in the way the calls started up again just after New Year's, this time with more restraint, more careful wording. Then one cold Saturday morning in January, the doorbell rang. I looked through the window and saw them, my parents and Deirdre, standing on my front porch, holding a red-wrapped gift box the size of a suitcase. I cracked the door open. My mother's face was pinched, her eyes darting nervously. "Camille," she said, her voice soft. We've thought a lot about what happened." My father stepped forward, holding out the box. "We brought a gift. For Lucas." Deirdre stood behind them, wrapped tight in her coat, her expression unreadable. "I'm sorry," she said. "I know I messed up." I stared at them. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. I just felt still. "You're not sorry for what you did," I said quietly. "You're sorry you got caught." My mother's face paled. "You didn't bring a gift for Lucas because you love him. You brought it because you want to patch a leak in your reputation." They all went silent. "For years," I continued, "you treated me like the backup child. And when Daniel died, you didn't step up, you stepped in. Not to help but to take. To manipulate. To use my grief as leverage." I could see my mother swallowing hard. Deirdre looked down at her shoes. I stepped out just enough to push the gift box gently back into my father's hands. "I don't want things," I said. "And Lucas doesn't need them. What he needs is a family who sees him, who loves him. Not a family who hides behind lies and guilt." Deirdre blinked, her eyes red. "Andrew left," she whispered. "He took the kids. Said he didn't know who I was anymore." I didn't flinch. "Then maybe it's time you figure it out." My mother reached out like she was about to grab my arm. "Camille, we can fix this." "No," I cut in. "You can't. Not with gifts. Not with words. Not with more of the same twisted love I grew up with." I stepped back inside, my voice flat but final. "I don't want you showing up here again." And with that I closed the door. The click of the latch sounded louder than thunder. I stood behind the door, hand resting on the knob, breathing in the silence that followed. A silence that didn't feel empty, but full. Lucas peeked out from the hallway. "Who was that, Mom?" I knelt down and smiled softly. "Just people from the past, sweetheart." He nodded, then pulled me toward the couch. "Come on. We still haven't finished our rocket puzzle." And just like that, the moment passed. No drama. No shouting. Just clarity. That spring, I transferred every penny I'd been sending my parents into a new college fund for Lucas. $1,000 a month, growing quietly. A future built not on guilt, but on love. On choices made with intention. And for the first time in my life I felt free. By April, the weight that had once followed me like a shadow was finally gone. It was strange how light everything suddenly felt. How the house seemed brighter, even though nothing had changed. Maybe it wasn't the furniture or the walls. Maybe it was me. I stopped checking my phone out of habit. There were no more guilt-tripping messages. No more sudden emergencies from my parents asking for favors. Just silence. Beautiful, uninterrupted silence. Instead, my world began to blossom again, slowly and gently, like spring after a punishing winter. I focused on Lucas, on his laughter, on his stories, on the 1,000 questions he asked every day. Questions that were no longer met with eye rolls or dismissals, but with patient answers and joy. Marianne and Harold came over every Saturday morning without fail. Marianne brought baked goods and gardening tools, and Harold brought new projects. Model airplanes, science kits, puzzles. Our weekends became sacred. Pancake breakfasts, backyard adventures, quiet evenings reading books by the fire. Lucas began to change, too. He stood taller, spoke louder, smiled more. He no longer tried to shrink himself to fit anyone's expectations. He didn't ask me why we didn't go to the other grandma's house anymore. He didn't have to. He'd found his real grandparents, the kind who didn't measure his worth by silence or obedience, but by the joy in his eyes when he shared something he learned. And then something extraordinary happened. One evening, as I was finishing dinner, Lucas quietly padded into the kitchen, his teddy bear tucked under one arm. He hesitated, then said, "Mom, can I ask you something?" "Always," I said. "Is it okay if I call Marianne and Harold my real grandma and grandpa now?" Froze. Not out of shock, but out of awe. The innocence in his question. The quiet decision he had clearly made in his own heart. I knelt in front of him and tucked a loose curl behind his ear. "Of course, sweetheart," I whispered. "Because they are your real grandparents. The ones who love you with their whole hearts." His face broke into a smile so wide it could have lit the whole room. That night, he called them to say good night. "Good night, Grandma. Good night, Grandpa." No hesitation. No correction. No confusion. Just truth. It was a moment I would never forget. From that point on, something inside me settled. Not the kind of settling that comes from giving in, but the kind that comes from finally finding firm ground after years of walking on eggshells. I had mourned the loss of Daniel, but now I was learning how to build a life again, one rooted in intention, not obligation. I started taking small steps toward building our future. I got a promotion at work, senior marketing director. The raise meant that, for the first time, I wasn't just surviving. I was growing, planning, hoping. I moved the rest of the insurance money into Lucas's college fund and started a separate savings account for future travel. I wanted him to see the world. I wanted him to know that life was more than the small, cold box my parents had tried to keep us in. We even started making our own traditions. Every first Saturday of the month, we had a curiosity day. Lucas picked a topic he wanted to learn about: black holes, dinosaurs, jellyfish, and we'd spend the day diving in. Books, experiments, documentaries. He soaked it up like a sponge. One weekend, he asked if he could invite Marianne and Harold. Of course they said yes. That day we learned about volcanoes, and Harold helped Lucas build a papier-mâché model that erupted red-dyed baking soda all over my clean floor. Marianne laughed so hard she nearly fell off her chair. It was messy. It was loud. It was perfect. There were still moments, of course. Brief, flickering shadows of the past. Sometimes I'd catch myself wondering what my mother would have said if she saw the telescope Lucas used to stargaze at night. Or how my father would have reacted if he saw Lucas win first place at the science fair. But the difference was, I no longer needed their reaction. Their approval. Their presence. Because I finally understood. Love that demands silence is not love at all. Lucas's light had been dimmed in that house for too long. And now it was shining, unfiltered, unashamed, and fiercely bright. In May, We got an invitation from Daniel's extended family to a weekend reunion in Colorado. I hadn't seen many of them since the funeral, but they had kept in touch, sending letters, small gifts, birthday cards for Lucas. So we went. It was one of the best weekends of our lives. Lucas played soccer with his cousins in the backyard until the sun went down. Aunt Kate taught him how to make her famous chocolate chip cookies. Uncle Robert showed him how to start a campfire. They didn't ask him to quiet down. They didn't ignore him when he asked about how firewood works or what animals hibernate. They answered. Joy. At one point, Lucas turned to me, covered in flour and dirt, and said, "Mom, I think this is what real family is." I swallowed the lump in my throat and nodded. It is, baby. It really is. That night, sitting under a sky full of stars, I pulled out my phone and opened the last photo I had ever taken at my parents' house. It was Christmas Eve. Tree. Kids. The forced smiles. I stared at it for a moment. Then I deleted it. Just like that. No ceremony. No tears. I was done holding on to memories that only served to reopen old wounds. I was building something better now. For Lucas. For me. And for once, I wasn't afraid to let go. By the time summer rolled in, Lucas and I were no longer surviving. We were thriving. Our home was filled with laughter, flower-covered kitchen counters, rocket ship blueprints, and books stacked high beside the bed. We were building something I once believed was only possible for other people. A joyful life untouched by guilt or manipulation. Still, there were moments when the past clawed at the door. In late June, Marianne and Harold surprised Lucas with tickets to the Johnson Space Center in Houston. The look on his face when he opened the envelope was something I'll carry with me forever. His mouth wide open, eyes shining like actual stars. "But really," he whispered, "we're going to see the rockets. For real." Harold ruffled his hair. "For real, buddy. Better start reading up on Mars." I took photos that day, so many in fact that my phone eventually buzzed with a storage warning. Lucas beamed next to life-sized shuttle replicas, pointed to rovers, asked the tour guide about oxygen recycling in space. Everyone answered him with the kind of warmth that used to be absent in his life. Not one person told him to, just be quiet. As he skipped between exhibits, I sat down on a nearby bench and watched him in awe. My son, so bright, so unafraid again. Then I checked my phone. One new voicemail. From Deirdre. I hadn't heard her voice in months. Not since that day on my porch when she stood beside our mother pretending contrition could fix everything. My finger hovered over the delete button. But something in me, a flicker of curiosity maybe, made me press play. "Camille, I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from. I needed to say it again. Sorry. Not just for Christmas. For all of it. For not standing up for you. For letting them use you. For helping them do it." Her voice cracked. "Andrew still hasn't come back. He took the kids to Florida for the summer. He says he needs space. And I don't blame him. Camille, I don't know if you can ever forgive me. But I wanted you to know. I admire you. See it now. What you did. Walking away. That was brave. I didn't cry. I didn't feel vindicated. I just sat there, listening to the silence that followed her final word. She hadn't asked for money. She hadn't begged. She'd simply admitted the truth. But truth, I had learned, wasn't the same as transformation. After the Space Center trip, I didn't call her back. Not because I hated her. Because forgiveness is not a doorway you walk through just because someone knocks. Sometimes you leave that door closed, not out of cruelty but to protect what you've rebuilt on the other side. And what I was rebuilding wasn't just a new life. It was a new legacy. In July, Lucas attended his first summer science camp at the community college nearby. Every morning, he walked in with his backpack swinging and a grin stretching from ear to ear. By the third day, he was already teaching me about centrifugal force at the dinner table. Marianne and Harold came to the closing ceremony. They clapped louder than anyone when Lucas stepped up to receive his little certificate. Afterward, as we took photos in the courtyard, one of the counselors pulled me aside. A kind woman in her 50s with silver strands in her braids and a lanyard of NASA pins. "Your son is something special," she said with a warm smile. "Thank you," I replied, barely holding back the wave of pride swelling inside me. "Do you know what he said when I asked him what he wants to be when he grows up?" I shook my head. He said, "I want to be someone who makes people feel smart, even if they ask silly questions." That hit me like a train. I blinked hard, swallowing the lump in my throat. "Yeah," I whispered. "That's Lucas." After the ceremony, we went out for ice cream. Lucas ordered mint chocolate chip with rainbow sprinkles and declared it the best day of his life. Marianne and Harold laughed, and I took a photo of them all clinking cones together like champagne glasses. That night, after Lucas had fallen asleep with his summer camp ribbon still around his neck, I stood at his door for a long time, just watching, just feeling. I had been afraid for so long, afraid of being alone, of being judged, of losing the scraps of love I thought I couldn't survive without. But now I knew. Walking away hadn't made me weaker, had made me whole. And then came the letter. It arrived in a plain white envelope, unmarked save for my name. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Handwritten. From my mother. I sat on the couch, paper trembling in my hands. "Camille, I know you don't want to hear from me. But I'm writing anyway because for once I'm not trying to fix this. I'm just telling the truth. I was wrong. About you. About Lucas. About everything. I let my pride, my control, and my fear guide me. And in doing so, I pushed away the best daughter I could have had. Lucas didn't deserve to be excluded. And you didn't deserve to be used. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I needed you to know I'm sorry." I stared at the page for a long time. It was the first time she hadn't made excuses. But that didn't mean I was ready to rebuild anything. I placed the letter in a drawer. Not to forget, but to remember. Because healing doesn't mean returning to the people who broke you. It means reclaiming yourself from their grip. And I had. In August, as Lucas and I planned his upcoming school year, we created something new together. The Big Jar of Dreams. A glass mason jar filled with little folded notes of goals, places we wanted to visit, things we wanted to learn. Some were simple. Build a robot. Some were bold. Visit Mars someday. One made me smile through tears. Make a family tree with Grandma Marianne and Grandpa Harold. That one went on the fridge. It was his truth now. Mine. We had made it through the storm. And the final chapter. It was just beginning. By September, the air had begun to shift, just enough to smell autumn in the breeze. The mornings were cooler, and Lucas had started second grade with a new backpack, new pencils, and the same boundless curiosity that had always set him apart. But this year there was something different about him. He stood taller, even though he'd only grown an inch. He answered questions in class with more confidence, smiled wider during morning drop-offs, and no longer hesitated when other kids asked about his family. "I live with my mom," he'd say proudly, "and my real grandparents who love space stuff like I do." His words didn't sting. They healed. That fall I realized I had changed too. I was no longer the woman who tolerated quiet digs or waited for approval like crumbs tossed from a dinner table. I had learned how to walk away. And in doing so, I taught Lucas the most important lesson of all. Love does not require suffering. One Sunday afternoon, Lucas was painting in the kitchen. His fingers stained with blue and yellow. I was folding laundry nearby when he looked up suddenly and asked, "Mom, do you think Dad can see us?" Pause. My throat tightened. "I think," I said carefully, "that your dad sees you every day. I think he'd be really proud of how kind and smart you are." Lucas smiled. "I think he'd like Harold and Marianne too." He nodded. "He'd love them. Just like he loved you." That night, after Lucas fell asleep, I sat alone on the porch, staring out at the quiet street. The leaves rustled gently above. There were no texts from my parents, no calls, no veiled requests. And yet, I didn't feel abandoned. Felt free. Then came Thanksgiving. Marianne offered to host, and I happily agreed. The house was warm with the smell of cinnamon and roasted turkey. Lucas helped set the table, carefully placing napkins folded into triangles like little rockets. His cousins from Daniel's side came too, Alex and Henry, both older, both endlessly patient with Lucas's questions. After dinner, we all sat around the fireplace, sharing memories and stories. Lucas curled up beside me, head on my lap, as Harold told the story of how Daniel had once broken the garage door by trying to build a go-kart with a leaf blower. The room roared with laughter. And in that moment, surrounded by real family, not perfect but genuine, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not long after, I received one final envelope. This time it wasn't from my parents. It was from a lawyer. Copy of a will. My maternal grandfather had passed away quietly in his sleep at the age of 89. I hadn't seen him since Lucas was a toddler, but we had exchanged a few letters. Short, thoughtful things. He had always been the quiet one in the family, the background figure, rarely intervening. Till now. Inside the envelope was a letter he'd written to be delivered to me after his passing. Camille, I watched for years as you were sidelined. I'm sorry I didn't speak up more. But I want you to know, my silence was never agreement. You were always the strongest of them all. And strength deserves to be recognized. Enclosed, you'll find a trust one set aside just for you and your son. Do with it what you will. But know this, I see you. And I always did. Grandpa Harold, the other one. Tears streamed down my cheeks. Not because of the money, but because someone, even in the background, had truly seen me. Had acknowledged what I endured. The trust wasn't enormous, but it was enough. Enough to secure Lucas's college fund. Enough to invest in a home upgrade we'd been dreaming of. Enough to know that love, real, quiet love, leaves fingerprints, even long after the hands are gone. That Christmas, we didn't just bake cookies or hang lights. We built a rocket model in the backyard and launched it together, just high enough for Lucas to shout. It worked. It really worked. He laughed so hard he fell into the snow. Marianne filmed the whole thing, and Harold clapped like a proud coach. Later that night, Lucas pulled me aside and said, Mom, next year, can we have even more people come over? I want to invite people who make my heart feel full. I smiled and kissed his forehead. Yes, baby. That's exactly the kind of family we build now. And we did. That spring, we hosted a found family feast. Not everyone was related by blood, but all were connected by love. Marianne and Harold, Daniel's siblings, Lucas's schoolteacher, even our next-door neighbor who always brought over extra muffins. We lit candles. We said what we were grateful for. And when it was my turn, I stood up and said the words I once thought I'd never be brave enough to say. I'm grateful for the people who didn't just show up, but stayed. Who saw us at our lowest and never once made us feel small. Who chose us not because they had to, but because they wanted to. That night, when I tucked Lucas into bed, he wrapped his arms around me and whispered, I like our story, Mom. Even the sad parts. Because they made the happy parts happier. And I cried. Not from sadness, but because he was right. We had walked through the fire. And we had emerged, stronger, brighter, free. Final quote. Family isn't defined by blood. It's defined by love, choice, and who stands beside you when the world turns cold. Camille's journey reminds us that walking away from toxicity isn't loss, it's liberation. She didn't just rebuild her life. She redefined what family means for herself and for Lucas. Sometimes the most courageous thing we can do is say no more. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe to Revenge Echoes for more powerful stories about truth, healing, and the justice we give ourselves. Share your thoughts in the comments. Who is your chosen family?